By 2025, it's estimated that over 32 million Americans, or nearly 22% of the workforce, will work remotely. And over 98% of Americans today desire to work remotely, even if on a part time basis. This is representing the shift that we're finding in remote work and all that it works for within our workplaces. Today on the show, we have Lisa Snow, founder of On the Mend Fitness. In our conversation, she shares her insights on ways to navigate remote work and hybrid workplaces by keeping the workforce engaged through wellness activities that are easily overlooked but are just as important, if not more important, than traditional means. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you like and subscribe to make sure you don't miss a future episode. Today we're talking about enhancing our and engaging our remote workers. So to level set, Lisa, what made this become a passion of yours?
We started out doing employee wellness in person, and we've really evolved to work with remote workers. I think it's such a challenge for leaders to get people to keep interacting. So when we started, my background before getting into wellness, I used to work on Wall Street. I was a tech person. I wasn't at a trading desk, but still, you really see the toll that it takes on people mentally and physically, just working the crazy hours and being in a cubicle was already really intense for people. And today, with remote and hybrid, I feel like it's even more of a challenge.
Right, right. And I feel like you see a lot of things that have changed over the last 5 years, 4 years specifically. What have you seen in your experiences that has shifted the wellness space when engaging employees?
I think there's a lot more focus on mental health, a lot more focus on community and getting employees to interact with each other as opposed to only looking at the physical side. I think if we go back 5, 10, 15 years, when people were thinking about wellness, they were only thinking about, like, let's bring somebody in to do blood pressure testing or flu shots
Yeah.
or just having a health fair with some local vendors. And of course, all of that preventive health is still necessary and still important. But I feel like we've really expanded the definition of wellness to really look at, do people have a sense of belonging? Do they feel like other people at work care about them or know what's going on with them or all of that?
And I think it's interesting to pair those things together because I think oftentimes when you think about wellness, you're right. The first thing you think about are the biometric screenings, the blood pressure checks, the flu shots, things like that. Because that's to me, I think even when you're talking about HR, oftentimes the things that are most physical, things that are most visible are the things we recognize or things we think about. But it's really those internal things, the belongingness, the wellness, those hidden things oftentimes that we don't really often put focuses on. So the work that you're doing here is really, really impactful. What would you say would be a great first place to start if an organization or an HR leader knows that their workplace has traditionally handled, flu shots, biometric screenings? What's a great first step for them if they want to dive more into more holistic wellness?
If they're thinking about a little bit more fitness or stretching or physical activity, I would start finding out, what are employees doing already? What do they like? What do they hate? Because with any program, you want people to have fun. You want people to be excited to be there. You do not want hostages, right?
Mhm.
So you want to find out, do you have a ton of golfers, but maybe they never stretch? Or do you have a bunch of people who hate the gym, but they love walking their dog or they love gardening, right? Maybe some resistance bands or some kind of strength training would really support the gardening that they're doing or whatever it is, right? And really think about their schedules. If you're going to try to get people a little bit more active, you've got to run a class when they can do it and at their level. So it's really important to have beginner friendly classes. So many people aren't active, right? You look at, kind of the official exercise recommendations, about 24% of Americans actually meet those recommendations, which are pretty minimal. So,
Mm.
Even if you have a really active, really vibrant group and you only have a couple of sedentary people, you want to make sure that those people feel included and that you kind of go above and beyond to make them feel like it's for them and like they're going to have just as much fun as everybody else.
And that's wonderful advice to understand what your workforce is experiencing already. I see it oftentimes in the Facebook groups or the LinkedIn groups or even just on regular blogs. And the questions that I see in the comments are often, well, I'm getting ready to put this new initiative in place, or we're getting ready to launch this new employee benefit. What should I do? And my answer is always, well, what does your team need? Where is your company right now? Because what works best for my company might not work best for someone else's. So that needs audit, that needs assessment really is really critical, because you don't want to put all this work into putting together a program that's not going to resonate with your people. So that's excellent, excellent advice there.
Oh, and just before and after benchmarking. So, a question that owners ask us all the time is, how do you measure that employee engagement is getting better? And we
Hmm.
don't. It's their HR leaders that do, right? We can measure how many people attended a lunch and learn. We can measure how often people came to a chair yoga class, but engagement is so complex and there's so many aspects that, it's incredible to be able to have an HR leader who's already in place, who's already running engagement surveys, see if we're helping and how we're helping and what we should change, right? If we're in a company for 6 months or a year, we don't need to wait until the end of a year to see if we're moving the needle. We need that
Right.
feedback from people like your listeners.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Because that's the only way you'll be able to really get true feedback to gauge or to shift things that are happening in the moment. So, like you say, you don't wait until the end of the year. Check in after a month, after a quarter to see how things are going, to use that feedback to make better changes. I love that. So, when you're engaging, I know we're talking today about engaging remote workers in your work. Do you also work with on site professionals right now today?
We do have some in person clients, but we're definitely more focused on the remote and hybrid market these days. I think for in person, a lot of leaders are just struggling with, should we really require people to come back? Should we require them to come back a couple of days? This is 2024. People are still struggling. They still haven't landed on the perfect answer.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And because of that, because there's still that limbo around what should people do and how should people do it, that impacts the morale and that affects the team building. So, in your experience, how have you seen wellness and team building interact? Like, how do you typically work with them in your organization? I know typically in most organizations, they're separate programs.
With big nationwide corporations, they've really spent the time to figure out how to get people to interact, even if they're in different states. But for a lot of small business owners, this is a brand new experience. A lot of small business owners and a lot of HR leaders in smaller organizations are used to everybody being in one city. And they don't necessarily have systems to bring people together because they never needed to. They were focused more on getting people the benefits they need or the continuing ed that they need or other things. So, with tiny businesses, a lot of leaders went from everyone being in one city to remote work happens and they start hiring people in different places. So, we had a client where they had people in Atlanta, Kansas City, New York, a few other places in the US, plus the Philippines and Nicaragua. So if they wanted to run an in person program, they really couldn't. And this is a neighborhood business with a dozen employees. So they don't have the budget to do what a Fortune 500 would do. They don't have the budget to fly everyone to New York or fly everyone to Atlanta. I mean, it's just not feasible. So, and even if they did, that might be once a year, once a decade. So they really needed a way for people to connect ongoing. So with a company like that, doing something like a weekly chair stretch not only gets people to stretch and exercise, it gets them talking to each other. It gets them opening up about what the weather is in those different cities or just what they're watching on Netflix. And it's amazing to see those relationships transform.
And I love the inclusion piece to include employees that are in various parts of not just the nation but the world even. I think it's interesting to me that when you're talking about engaging employees and engaging workforces, I think of it often when we're talking about the employee experience. And I talk primarily to HR departments of one. But the employee doesn't care that you're an HR department of one. They want their benefits on time. They want to make sure they're paid on time. They want to make sure that everything that they have in terms of an employment relationship is similar to that of their peer, whether it's their family member, whether it's their friend. They don't care about that. And so, similar to that, I think of that in terms of the location differences. Employees don't care that they're the only person in the city. They want to make sure that their employee experience is the same as that of their peer that they're talking to through email twice a week and things like that. So, it's really good to understand that we have to include employees regardless of where they are, because the employee experience is so, so critical. So, how can Zoom based wellness programs help to integrate those new employees into the workplace? Our companies have established cultures and established norms. So, in your experience, what has been the experience of having Zoom programs where you're able to get those new employees acclimated to your company culture?
Culture has so many facets and it's so hard to translate to Zoom, especially for small businesses. They've invested so much time and effort back when they were in person into creating the culture, creating shared expectations. And once you add in a lot of new employees from different places, they may know the products or services that the company provides, but they don't necessarily know how their coworkers think or what the vibe is. So we always want to give them opportunities to do some shared brainstorming. So it doesn't necessarily have to be about work related goals, but let's say they're learning about tracking macros or how to get their calcium or some kind of nutrition topic, right? Um, Getting more fiber is a huge thing these days. 97% of Americans don't get enough fiber. So, if we're doing a lunch and learn about a topic like that, they don't need to hear us talk and talk and talk and talk for an hour. What they really need is to spend time with each other, figuring out things that are practical in real life, right? Like it's all fine and good that veggies have fiber and antioxidants, but what really matters is when you have someone who says, I work 80 hours a week, my spouse works 90 hours a week, and my kids hate vegetables. They don't need to hear more about which exact nutrients are in that. They need to talk to their coworkers and say, what are you doing? And one person says, well, I tried this meal delivery thing and it was really fun to make these recipes with my kids. And another person says, oh my gosh, I have an insane day. I'm never going to have time to cook, but I discovered, this great new takeout place that has these, healthy build your own bowls. And another person says, man, I don't even have enough time to leave my desk to go to the bowls place, but I found this salad spot that delivers. And right. And those ideas just build. And the outcome of that isn't just that people find out where the salad place is, it's that they see how do their coworkers do problem solving? How do they communicate as a group? Are they good listeners? Can they get to know something about each other personally, right? Maybe all they knew about each other was their LinkedIn profiles and now they know that so and so has a dog or whatever it is, right? And I think that when people have normal human error that's going to happen in every company with all of us, um instead of being like, ugh, the finance people, it's, oh, that's Lisa, and even though she's in a different city, maybe we're watching the same shows or, it just I think it reduces the amount of tension that gets escalated to HR sometimes.
Yes. And I think that's one of the powerful benefits and one of the unspoken things that people don't quite think about when you're talking about engagement programs or wellness programs. On the surface, it seems like you're just doing, fun events, or in some people's eyes, it could even be seen as a waste of time. But if you think about it, just like you mentioned, it allows you to create those affinity attributes between if different employees who may not have ever had that conversation come up if they were only talking about, the whatever the work assignment was. If you're only ever talking about work, again, too much of anything is not a beneficial thing for any one of us. So if we're only talking about work in the workplace all the time, it leaves no space for us to show up as our true selves, our full selves. So I love that when you're talking about introducing the way people think and the way people are and their own attributes to the conversations for new employees to get a chance to learn and to establish their own place. I think one of the fun things it's good to see in our own engagement programs we have inside of our organization while working my 9 to 5, to see the new hires, they pop in and they have they send their funny memes and they do they include their funny their take on how things are going. And when they see something happening, they don't sit on the sidelines. Most times the new hires want to be included as well. Who doesn't want to be included in a fun thing that's happening? So to have these intentional wellness programs that are designed to engage, that are designed to include everyone, regardless of their role, regardless of their title, regardless of their location, it's powerful, very, very powerful. So as we close out our time, are there any closing statements that you like to add or anything that we did not cover that you want to share?
You guys are pros, so I'm sure you know this already. But as you're designing wellness programs, really think about who might self select out and what can you do to make that person feel included. Right? So if you think about the kind of old school wellness programs that people were doing pre COVID, if you offer everyone a gym membership, the people who are going to join are going to be the people who already exercise. How could you get those non exercisers involved? Or, if you were offering them a class at a gym with bright lights and loud music, if you've got folks with headaches or migraines, they're not going to sign up for that. So really think about, or if you have people with young kids who are really struggling to find childcare for an after work program, maybe you could run it at lunch. So just use that creativity and use that knowledge that you have of individual employees and think about how to make things accessible.
Nice. Great, great. And I think it's important that as HR leaders, we consider how can we engage again workers from the variety of areas that we serve and support. So that this is very, very important, Lisa. If anyone wants to get in contact with you, how will they do that?
So I'm very active on LinkedIn. So Lisa Snow on the Men is the best place to reach me. And if you have specific questions about a wellness program that you're running and maybe some challenges you're running into, maybe contact Brittany and she could forward me some questions.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, thank you, Lisa, so much for your time. And anyone who's watching, if you have any questions for Lisa, drop them down in the comments below, and either she'll circle back and answer them, or I'll send them to her to make sure that we get them answered for you. So thank you for your time today, Lisa, and the work that you're doing and helping us all to work more completely and to support our workforce in a very intentional way. That ends our episode of HR Leadership Lessons. Everything we discussed today can be found at talentedteamsconsulting.com. Head to our website to access the show notes, relevant links, and all the resources you need to grow on purpose in HR leadership. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and be sure to never miss future content. Drop us a review and show us some love, and show our guests some love on social media. Thanks again for listening.